An early winter storm has pounded Vancouver Island. Ferry docks at Swartz Bay and Departure Bay suffered heavy damage, and it could be weeks before they can be repaired. For now, BC Ferries has cancelled all sailings between the mainland and Vancouver Island. Cleanup crews are being dispatched while the total estimate of the damage...
Sooner or later there's going to be some type of a catastrophe happening down in California, earthquake, weather-related problems, polluted water, those type of things, and the food chain would be cut off very quickly.
Here on Vancouver Island, we need the BC ferries badly. If we had a major problem where we could not get them over here, we only have enough fresh fruits and vegetables to last us 4 to 6 days. What will happen, of course, is the consumers will panic buy and go into buying everything that we've got, and we're in trouble.
Most of our food on Vancouver Island comes from global transport chains dependent on oil for transport and fertilizers that impact our climate, our soil, and our water. Produce is shipped to us every day from faraway places. Huge monocrop farms are hailed as the most economical way of producing food. But the push to produce cheap food makes the system susceptible to spreading deadly bacteria like E. coli and Listeria, and has also led to major outbreaks of animal disease such as BSE and avian flu. After the Second World War, the same companies that made chemical weapons turned to making fertilizers and pesticides. These chemicals are still weapons, as they create hazardous runoff and leave land that has been sapped of its natural nutrients. Those same fertilizers run off the land into our oceans, and these nutrients feed algae blooms. The algae blooms suffocate sea life, robbing the water of oxygen, which creates so-called dead zones, one of which was discovered off the Saanich Peninsula as early as 1960. We could reduce our impact on the environment by growing our food without fertilizers and pesticides, organically, even in our own backyards. But governments have been slow to react to these environmental issues, preferring to maintain the status quo of world trade that depends on petrochemicals. Governments have been quick to respond, however, to an energy opportunity, praising biofuels as a way to address climate change and fuel dependency. But biofuels are being grown on the same land once used to grow food for people. As food and fuel compete for land, crop prices are soaring. Much of the new required ethanol could be made from agricultural waste like corn stalks and straw, and its production would not compete directly with food production. What's more important, what we put in our mouths or what we put in our gas tanks? Food no longer has a face or a place.
You know what? Our appetites are a big part of the problem. We want big houses on big parcels of land, pushing away farms from our cities. We drive our cars everywhere and anywhere we want, and we want convenience foods, fast foods, high in fat and sugar, and they're killing us. Obesity and adult type 2 diabetes are reaching epidemic proportions.
Today, with commodity prices growing higher almost daily, careful food selection is of great importance to every shopper. Not only the lowest priced item from a selection, but the one which offers the greatest nutrition is the true best buy. No one really believes that the housewife's life was really good in those yesteryears, nostalgically known as the good old days. Today's homemaker has to acquire a different set of skills, and in today's shopping center economy, one of the skills the housewife must acquire is to be a discriminating shopper.
We all need 3 servings of fruit and vegetables every day, but the ones you choose and the way you prepare them have a great bearing on your nutritional status. It's a real challenge to try and choose the right fruits and vegetables. especially if you're looking for the particular vitamins this food group supplies.
Marketing professionals, even back in the 60s and 70s, focused our public attitudes on convenience and total acceptance of supermarkets and processed food. This bit was clearly influenced by the processed food industry. Why buy fresh and local food when you can get canned or frozen? Marketing has not really changed. In the 70s, healthy images of the perfect family were used to sell us the wholesomeness of milk. The cookies, most likely made with trans fat-laden margarine, became popular because marketers told us it was better for us. Food processors invented junk food with trans fats to fulfill our desires. Now, we're being warned that these same foods are unhealthy. But through more stylized and slick ads, new processed foods are marketed to us as cures. Trying to follow the trends is like watching the flavor of the month change at the ice cream parlor. Added fiber, whole grains, zero trans fats, omega-3s. Does anybody really know what prebiotics and probiotics are? What we really need to know is what's in our food and where it comes from. Labels don't always tell the truth.
Many people want to know what's in their food, but so far we haven't been able to get good labeling laws in Canada. Labeling laws in Canada are changing. Made in Canada will mean the product was manufactured or processed in Canada, and product of Canada will now mean all major ingredients and labor used in making the product comes from Canada. But you aren't going to see anything labeled as being genetically modified.
There has been a huge backlash in terms of mandatory labeling for genetically modified organisms. Industry simply doesn't want it, and in fact when some companies have tried to do voluntary labeling, there is a pushback against it. There's a powerful industry lobby that is undermining the consumer's right to know. One of the things that has been happening behind closed doors is something called smart regulations and also the Security and Prosperity Partnership Agreement. There's an attempt to harmonize under the radar our regulations with the United States. And we've recently seen this with the amount of pesticides that are now allowed on fruit and vegetables.
We went to the Government of Canada website to investigate what the new smart regulations will mean. We found that our federal government wants to cut red tape, reduce complexity, and advance Canadian priorities. What really caught our attention was that the Government of Canada is aiming for regulatory cooperation with the United States, who we know have been bowing to lobby pressure and consistently lowering their own standards.
I think it's the big boys who are cutting into our society, and they aren't listening.
Just more and more you're seeing genetically modified corn and everything. So like we try and eat locally as much as we can, grow our own food, and just avoid pesticides and science experiments.
Now just as industry can lobby, so can the consumer. And so what we really do need is that consumer lobby that talks about safety and protection and content and all those kinds of things.
You know, at one time the peninsula was a pretty active farming area, milk, chickens, you know, just poultry and everything. And
beef, lamb, pork, you know, poultry in plenty. We know that from the vibrancy of the community newspaper, the agriculture section in the community newspapers of the day, the Saanich papers, the Cowichan Valley papers, all had big sections devoted to local food production. And it wasn't because it was new and faddish, it was the real deal, it was part of the economy.
The ridge behind us up here, the Keating Ridge, there was up to 40 small berry farms, strawberries, raspberries, and small fruit. Now, I don't think there's any, it's all houses built up. So the areas where there was originally the smaller farms, they're no longer there.
More than 50% of the food was local until 1960. Refrigerated ships, reefer units on trains and trucks, all those things sort of combined to create a viability for commodity food production. The more viable commodity foods got, the less viable it became to produce local food, because suddenly your local egg was what? 20% more expensive than the commodity-produced egg.
Cherished as a possession by man, sometimes abused, land today is a resource which is being threatened by man's continuing expansion and development. It's difficult for us in BC, and in fact all of Canada with our vast land surface, to truly appreciate the fact that land is limited.
In BC, we were fortunate that the government saw the writing on the wall, and in the 1970s formed the Agricultural Land Reserve, or ALR, as a way to protect farmland.
We have an expanding population, a population that is dependent upon imported food to a great extent. We find that the limited amount of agricultural land that we have was being rapidly gobbled up.
5%, or 11.6 million acres of land, was protected for farming. Of BC's total land mass, only 2.7% of land is ideal for a range of crops, and only 0.6% is prime agricultural land.
And in the province of BC, pedologists from the soil survey units using aerial photographs have been backed up by extensive field work, compiling maps, indicating the land's capability for agriculture, forestry, and other uses, recreation and wildlife among them, with related specialists cooperating.
The formation of the ALR wasn't without controversy. Many farmers objected to the way it was done and questioned the root causes of the loss of farmland.
Although I don't agree with the way it was done, not by a long shot or any stretch of the imagination, I think that if another deal on this land development or land protection or land freeze, whatever you want to put it, I believe if the agricultural industry had been getting the full price over the years, the last 25 or 30 years, or maybe even longer, I think this would have taken care of the land itself. There wouldn't have been any need for farmers to have sold their land so that they could retire.
Since its formation in 1973, the ALR has had a difficult time. In 1988, golf courses were allowed on ALR land. 181 proposals covering over 20,000 acres of ALR were received, and in the end, 89 were allowed to proceed. In 1991, a moratorium was finally put in place. Since the formation of the ALR in the 1970s, we've seen a constant erosion. Although the government claims that there is as much or more land in the Agricultural Land Reserve than there was originally there, the truth is that the most fertile farmlands, which coincidentally happen to be around our cities and urban areas where the majority of our population live, that farmland has been excluded from the Agricultural Land Reserve and traded with less fertile land in the north.
When I fly over Richmond, I sort of shake my head and say, what happened? Because as a kid, I used to go to Richmond and pick blueberries and strawberries. From a personal perspective, it's not something I'm proud of as a British Columbian to look down at Richmond and say, holy Dinah, what happened?
We must save the farmland. Now our agricultural land freezing in BC, at first we thought this is awful. Now we know it's the best thing that happened. Because if it didn't happen, I'm sure this whole hillside here would be high rises and houses. I mean, look at the view. So we've gone through some pretty high pressure times with developers wanting to buy this land, put houses on it because it's great view, it's some of the finest view property, but we want to keep it for farming, to grow food on like we've done, like our ancestors done many years ago.
We used to produce 85% of our own produce here on the island, and now we're down to 35%. There's something wrong with that figure. When we have a beautiful climate, everything grows. It's a wonderful environment for growing anything healthy, actually.
So she believes that we grow 35% of our food? If only that were true. Things have changed a lot, even since 1983, when Harvey Schroeder was the Minister of Agriculture.
It didn't occur to me that agriculture was number 2 in the number of people employed. 42,000 people are directly employed now. I'm not talking about processing, I'm not talking about distribution, but I'm talking about primary production. 42,000 people directly involved. It's second only to forests. We now produce just a little over 50% of the food that we consume. I think that it is reasonable to have as a goal that we should produce at least as much as we consume and then be able to market and trade and export and import the varieties so that we can be self-sufficient.
Harvey Schroeder, great Minister of Agriculture.
Was that a pipe dream?
Well, certainly the economy of British Columbia has changed dramatically since the early 80s. Oil and gas wasn't that big a part of our economy in the early 80s. Forestry was a bigger part than it is today. Tourism certainly wasn't as big a part as it is today. But I mean, I think his goals are not bad goals. I just am not sure that they're achievable.
How much of, on Vancouver Island, how much food do we produce here that we consume?
I have no idea what the percentages are.
We've heard from a number of sources that it's as low as 6%.
That doesn't, I mean, it doesn't really shock me because so much of the island is non-productive.
As best as we can estimate, we only produce around 6% of the food we eat here on Vancouver Island. In British Columbia, only 23%. That's not to say that farming is on the way out, but we are approaching a crucial point where smaller farms serving their immediate communities could be the future of our food.
There's a race on right now, and the race is between the decline of the agricultural infrastructure, the farm infrastructure in Canada, which includes the farmers, but the equipment manufacturers, the guys who repair it, the people who shear sheep, the farriers. There's a whole huge infrastructure out there which is declining for all the reasons that we know about the collapse of farming, and yet we have a countervailing force, which is the rise of local food. And in my mind, and in the minds of many of our readers in the magazine, I know there's this tension, the race. Are we going to lose that farm infrastructure before small farms get viable? And if we do, if we lose that infrastructure, we're really in big trouble.
We want you to get to know some of the farmers who are trying to make a difference by providing Vancouver Island with locally grown food. The Mitchells are one of our oldest farm families remaining on Vancouver Island's Saanich Peninsula.
It's right on this hillside, which was part of my great-grandfather's farm in the 1860s, and then of course I passed on to my grandfather, then my father, and now to my generation, which is fourth, and now we're in the process of turning it over to my two sons, Terry and Tom, and then from then on to our two grandsons. So that'll be 6 generations, hopefully.
Up to the 80s, it was pretty much potatoes and strawberries, and now it's 30 different crops of vegetables and fruits.
It's very important now to the public that it's grown within a very close area from where they live, and to know it's growing here and we produce it. They just love that.
The Mitchells have a large scale for Vancouver Island farm that used to be conventional, but have since converted their farm practices to integrated pest management, which seeks to reduce the amount of herbicides and fertilizers used in the fields.
This farm supports pretty much 10 or 12 families full, year-round, so we're producing a lot of product.
John and Katie Ellick own Alderley Farm, a biodynamic farm in Glenora near Duncan.
I think I developed a romantic notion of peasant farming as a teenager, and because I grew up in the suburbs, and my parents were both professionals, so farming's not in my background. And so I traveled through Central America after that, learned more about small-scale farming. After that, I went to university and studied small-scale farming from a political, economic policy level. And third year in university, I started working on farms during the summer. And then I really enjoyed the work and enjoyed everything about farming. And I apprenticed for the next 5 years, mostly on organic biodynamic farms.
A biodynamic farm emphasizes balancing the holistic development and interrelationship of the soil, plants, animals as a close self-nourishing system.
We were lucky to buy this farm before the prices went up on Vancouver Island 5 years ago. The first 2 years we started off small. We kept our investment to a minimum, and we've just been gradually building up, growing about 30–40% a year. My goal is to grow the highest quality vegetables possible using biodynamic farming methods.
What I really appreciate about the biodynamic method is that it increases the fertility of the soil. So not only are we providing excellent vegetables, but it's also improving the health of the soil.
While the Mitchells and Ehrlichs have quite a bit of farming experience, the future of our food supply lies with encouraging younger people to get into the business. So let me introduce you to a rare breed, a young first-time farmer. 26-year-old Kat Shepard and her partner are renting a cabin and a piece of land in Cowichan Station. She confessed to me that she really didn't know what she was getting into.
I decided I wanted to get into farming. I know I don't want to be working in an office. I love growing food and producing food. It's important to me. I think it's important to the community. That's probably idealistic and young and naive, I've been told that. It's a lifestyle choice, I realize that. It's not just a job. It doesn't make very much money for me, I don't think. I'm just excited to grow food, basically. I do have a university education. I have a post-secondary or postgraduate degree, and I worked in the lab for a little bit, and that's just not the right place for me at all. I'm rock farming. If I could make money off of rocks, I would be a rich woman this year. Yeah, hopefully when you come back, let's see, I'll have peas and a fence and some transplants. Oh, and a greenhouse.
Small Potatoes Urban Delivery is a company specializing in home delivery of organic produce. At this meeting, they were looking for more local producers to supply them with their goods. Kat thought she could sell them the eggs from her laying hens.
I have 110. They're Cornish cross. They are wonderful and cute. I think they're 3 days old right now. The marketing board regulates who I can sell to and who I can't, and they want you to get a permit and pay them money so that you can sell your chicken, which I don't really agree with. Yeah, I've got people lined up right now to buy them.
But nature stepped in a few weeks later with a dose of reality in the form of a vicious mink attack.
We came up to shut them in at nighttime, and it was just a massacre, basically. It was really sad. I know they're not pets, but you still sort of have a connection with them, and I felt really badly, actually, for them. I think we found about 10 of the chickens, and then a few more of them just were missing, and we never found them, and now we have 11.
There's no way that someone like Kat is going to make a living in the first few years of her farming adventure, but she can look to others in the area who have been successful for inspiration. They will all admit that the first few years are more pain than gain, and that farming isn't regarded as a way to make a good living.
If you're smart and you're focused and you're disciplined and you're really committed and you're willing to work hard, that this kind of work can generate a very good return financially. I can talk to young people about why it's important to do this work. I can teach them. I can entice them with the food. I can tell them how there's a lot more sex going on. They should get involved with agriculture for that reason. But until the point where I can demonstrate that they can make a decent living, all the rest of it is bullshit.
Your first year, you're working for nothing anyway. Like in our first year, we did sell enough to cover our expenses, but we didn't pay ourselves anything.
Generally, I found it takes about 2 to 3 years to bring a new field into production. After 3-4 years, the field starts to show its strength and vitality.
I have 1 acre under production. I started with about half an acre, and it's intensive growing. It's you know, when a crop is finished, you're replanting as soon as you can.
And people aren't so much looking at the price tag as the only thing that matters anymore. They're looking at the quality of the food, the environmental footprint of growing it, the health, the freshness, you know, all those things. People are valuing their food more.
We don't get too many questions about the price. You know, once they start eating it, they just realize why, and they get to know us, and they realize we're not, you know, we're just making a modest living.
You can make $10,000 to $30,000 in small farming now, and if we can get that to 30 to 70, I think we'll go over a magical number.
Some people buy land and let it sit empty, just because they hope that someday it will be taken out of the agricultural land reserve and they can sell it for big bucks to some housing developer. Or they build a big house with a big driveway and never plant anything they can eat.
For a young person to start farming now with the prices of land, the tractors, the equipment, the fuel and everything, it would almost be impossible.
It's unaffordable. Like, this is really, the situation we have here is really the only way that I think I could farm. To buy land, a couple of acres for You know, $250,000 without any house on the property is, we can't afford that. I can't afford that. I couldn't even make mortgage payments, you know, or loan payments on the farm income. So I think that's a huge obstacle for farmers, young farmers.
So we have a young woman who's trying to start a farm. She wants to be close to a major market, but there's no way she can afford the land, and she would never be able to afford it on a small farm income.
There's no question there are challenges. The question is, how much should government get involved in that or any other industry? You know, we've said as a government we're not going to subsidize industry. So we can't sort of pick and choose and say, well, we're going to subsidize agriculture, but we're not going to subsidize something else. Usually when government gets involved in something like that, we end up screwing things up. We end up screwing up the marketplace. And I think, you know, there are people making money out of farming. Should we be then subsidizing other people to go in and compete with them? I'm not sure that's a good idea. But I think it is a good idea to start out renting.
The key, however, is tenure. In regards to agriculture, I hear people discussing tenure in regards to 10, 15-year leases. Ain't gonna work, you know. I think a minimum arrangement has got to be 25 years. I would like to see longer than that, okay? Why do I say that? Well, I now know that it takes, usually it's not till the 10th year that a farm has really kind of reached its keel, where it's actually moving along, the systems are in place. After the 5th year, you begin to really generate some return and get things. But it's really until the 10th year that it stabilizes.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. As a matter of fact, when I had sustainable resource management, we changed that to actually grant longer tenures. And so I have no difficulty. If somebody wants to extend the term of lease on Crown land, I have no difficulty with that.
We've come to associate a rural economy with a guy going off to working in a logging camp or at a pulp mill, bringing the money back and dumping it into his front yard in the form of a ride-on lawnmower, which he mows 2 acres with. Well, there's another vision, which is that 2 acres or 20 acres is actually farmed, and that money from that farm not only supports the farm, but it helps the family that lives there live a middle-class life.
You know, we could grow the 10 times the amount of the produce on land that's sitting idle right now.
One of the solutions to tenure is empowering communities to buy up the farmland themselves, to own a part of their own food shed. Groups like Farm Folk, City Folk, and the Land Conservancy of BC that I work with are trying to start new farms across the province by helping communities, groups of individuals, come together to buy up farmland that they wouldn't be able to afford on their own. Well, we found a lot of solutions on Vancouver Island. Some of my favorites include Paula Sobey from City Harvest. Paula and her partner Martin are working in Oak Bay, farming in backyards.
We chose it because we were committed to living in the city of Victoria for a variety of reasons, and we just were passionate about food and about increasing food security, and we thought that this was an opportunity for us to get involved in a really tangible way. We're farming right now in 18 yards, predominantly in Oak Bay and in Fairfield. We're in immediate proximity to the markets, which is great. We're not turning over any land or in competition for land that's already a scarcity. We're not, I mean, we certainly didn't have the financial resources to purchase farmland at the rates that they're charging now for the land. And I think what we're trying to do is just use land a little bit more intelligently and go back to some values that people held in the past of using land to grow the food that essentially nourishes us, not only our body, but our health and our community health. It does a lot actually for local food security and for bringing the community together, for teaching people about growing food, for showing them what the potential is in our own yards.
Originally, Oak Bay didn't want to let Paula farm. Actually, in Oak Bay, it was illegal to farm commercially in backyards. But Paula challenged this with the help of some other community groups, and Oak Bay changed their bylaws to allow small-scale urban agriculture for commercial purposes. The Victoria Fruit Tree Project is another excellent example. In the city, we have tons of fruit trees that drop their fruit every year and end up in compost bins being wasted. The project goes around with volunteers and harvests that fruit and makes sure that it's used.
The life cycle started 1998 with people just going into backyards and picking fruit. Over the years, become more organized. We pick fruit in Greater Victoria, mostly in the closer communities, and we divide the fruit up so that 25% goes to the volunteers, 25% goes to the homeowners, 25% goes to our project to help raise funds for our project, and 25% we bring to food agencies and local community food banks.
It's very, very enjoyable to come and pick fruit. You see areas of the city that I've never gone into, people's back gardens that you don't go into. It is a win-win-win situation. The volunteer does take some fruit home as a result of the 3 or 4 hours picking.
With the younger generation these days, like, we're kind of less aware than our parents were about local food and about kind of making our own food, like if we're, you know, making applesauce or plum jam or what have you. So yeah, it's nice for that kind of aspect to learn more about fruit and the food that grows close to home. And yeah.
Homeowners love it. I think for the most part they see it as a service. They feel bad that the fruit's falling on the ground, and this gives them a chance to give something back to the community.
For the last few years, we've been purchasing apples from Life Cycles through their fruit tree project, and it came about because they were looking to do some value-added products with their extra fruit, and they approached us and asked us if we could make a cider. We could identify a few of the varieties that they brought, and one of them was king apples, these huge green King of Tomkin apples, which are a coastal heritage apple, and then some northern spies, which were quite unusual to find for this part of the country, and then a whole mystery batch. So we ended up calling it Kings and Spies. And this cider proceeds then go to support the work of Life Cycles on advocating for local food security. We have such amazing growing conditions here, and I think a population that is really sensitive to and aware of the need for supporting local farming.
Our industrial food system has made the spread of foodborne illness much more common. Outbreaks of avian flu, mad cow disease, E. coli, or listeriosis have our government scrambling to react with more inspections, more regulations, more red tape. But this red tape in the agriculture industry has threatened the livelihoods of many island farmers. Let's start off with the story of the Archers of Fairburn Farm.
We wanted to be a dairy farm, but the quota system and the rules and regulations, we decided we're too old to get into milking cows. The government says this is a world economy, get out in the world and see what other people are doing. That's what we did. And there's more buffalo milked in the world than there are cows in Asia and different areas. It got me really interested in pursuing a little bit further.
So the Archers decided to import a herd of water buffalo from Europe. They were going to make water buffalo mozzarella cheese. After they imported the cows, disaster struck. BSE reared its ugly head, mad cow disease, in North America, and the Archers were ordered to destroy all of the animals they had imported. They fought it. They fought it for years. While the battle was going on, a curious meeting took place. A coincidental meeting between one of the Archers' daughters and a senior official within the U.S. Department of Agriculture named Linda Detweiler.
And she asked Linda Detweiler if she knew about the buffalo in Canada, and she said, we most certainly do. And they had a discussion about the fact they were organic animals and where they'd come from. But Linda Detweiler finally finished off by saying, well, don't you worry, my dear, we're going to make sure they're destroyed.
The government probably spent over $1 million destroying our 19 animals, and they would have put $100 million and just get their own way. They weren't backing down.
When all the fighting was over, the Archers had lost. All of the original imported herd were ordered to the executioner.
We had a meeting prior to them being killed, and we had other farmers there. One farmer said, are you going to find anything in these animals? And one of the government officials said, oh, absolutely not, they're clean animals. And so I said, then why are you killing them if you know they're clean animals? Well, it's something we have to do.
So what did they then hear from the government?
Just that they were clean. And we got a certificate to say that they are free of BSE.
One of the top scientists in England said when you put politics and science together, it's politics that wins out every time.
The government spared the lives of the offspring of the original imported buffalo, but it took years for the Archers to rebuild the herd. Now there's just enough milk being produced to make water buffalo mozzarella, and it's in high demand.
There is a role for government to make sure that what is being produced and sold is safe for human consumption and will not cause harm.
They're imposing these just unbelievably rigorous, not sensible health standards, but industrial health standards. They think everyone's abattoir should be run under the same conditions that the abattoir in Brandon, Manitoba that processes 10,000 hogs a week. And here's an abattoir up in Duncan that maybe processes 10 hogs, 12 sheep, and six cattle or something like that.
If a person wants to raise, have a small herd of cattle, 30, 40 head of cattle, and supply beef to the local market, then they should obviously be able to do that. Do we want to make sure that it's done in a healthy way? Obviously.
The healthiest and safest way to process meat is as close to where those animals were raised. One of the largest limiting factors to local meat production in the world now is actually the lack of local processing facilities.
You have to have an inspector on site every time an animal's killed. That inspector needs an office, that inspector needs a bathroom, yada, yada, yada. It's just prohibitive.
Lyle Young owns Cowichan Bay Farm. He raises pasture-fed ducks and chickens. When new meat inspection regulations were on the horizon, as put into effect by the provincial government, some poultry processing plants were going to shut down, leaving him without a place to process his animals. So what did he do? He built one of his own. It wasn't easy.
Being the first plant in BC to try and meet the new regulations, to build a new plant to meet these new regulations, and we were required to do all kinds of things that seemed above and beyond what would be reasonable. And my impression now is that now that the new meat inspection laws have become law and are being enforced, that the government has understood that we would have lost a lot of infrastructure, a lot of important infrastructure across BC. In fact, we have lost a lot of infrastructure. And they've realized that they've had to, I don't want to say soften up on the regulations, but let's say be more reasonable with what the expectations are of smaller plants.
There's no question it's an issue, and it's an issue that I hear about as I travel in various parts of the province, mainly the outlying parts of the province. And I've had one briefing on it. I've asked for a second briefing on it because I am not convinced that it's working the way that it should be working.
We made a commitment to do custom processing for small farms, and that was sort of a key point of our whole philosophy. And I'm happy to say that last year we processed poultry from 350 small farms on Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands. So our plant has become an extremely important piece of infrastructure in ensuring that small family farms can have poultry as some of their financial income.
We need people that want to get into sheep shearing, working in an abattoir, and then as a society we have to recognize the value. So when that guy goes out to a pub and says, "Yeah, I work in a slaughterhouse," you know, three girls on the table over go, "Ooh, that's pretty attractive quality," right? Because right now we're almost at the opposite. Some of those things are really looked down on.
Well, I think the cost of food is an issue to everybody, but if it's fresh and grown on the island, I guess I'm willing to pay for it.
If it was almost the same, definitely we'd always go toward the BC products and local products. If it's double, you think twice.
No, it's important to support the local economy, local farmers.
Our people require a higher wage because of the cost of living. Therefore, they require more money, therefore increasing the price of the product.
Our food is the cheapest in the world, and a good example is the bananas that we import from Ecuador. When I started in this company 15 years ago, we were selling them for 59 cents a pound, and today, in 2008, my price is 59 cents a pound. In that time, gas has gone from 39 cents a litre to $1.10 a litre.
Americans on average spend 9.3% of their income on food, the lowest percentage in the world. India, 53.1%, Italy, 25.7%, Japan, 19.1%, France, 16.3%, and Canadians, 10%.
As a percentage of our income, Canadians and Americans pay the least amount of money for any food that we eat, even at restaurants, compared to what we earn.
Restaurant goers, they have to be aware that in the end, they have to pay for it. And why? Is because we're going out of our way to give them something, unique, local, something fresh. It's a business. We're not doing this for us to put a big eagle sign on our thing saying we use local product. We're doing it for them. We're doing it for the farmers. We're doing it for the economy. Because it'd be a hell of a lot easier for me to sit back with my blank, order form from blank company and just knock off what I need and get it from California or get it from wherever. It's a lot easier for me to do that, and I would make a lot more money. But that's not what we do.
There's going to be a tremendous increase in the food prices in the next few years. It's beginning to show now. Everything costing more, so people must pay more for what they eat. It just has to happen.
Our price of organic white flour went from around $18 per bag to $42 per bag in increasing increments early in 2008. So that put a real strain on our ability to keep our costs of a loaf of bread at the same level, and we after 4 years of being in business, we eventually had to take a price increase.
When I see people selling their products that they have worked hard to produce for what I know for a fact was below the cost of production, I feel that is a rip-off not only to themselves, it's a rip-off to the entire chain, all the links of the chain, all the way down.
There is a challenge that faces local farmers in increasing the price of food to a level where they can make a living. Some people in society can't afford to pay higher prices. Farms have to survive. People have to eat, but at what cost?
How are you, farmer, going to feed the world's population, and specifically those who are in lower income? And my answer is very simple. The fact that we have haves and have-nots is an economic problem. It's a problem with society that has created that based on the economic system. It's not an agricultural problem, And as such, it is not just the responsibility of farmers. Every year there's somebody that shows up at our stand that whines about the 25 cents more for the strawberries. And inevitably, I guarantee you, they're always wearing the silk chiffon shirt and the gold bracelets, and they got the BMW or the Mercedes keys. That's who complains, right?
It's reasonably important. I would say 40% important.
Gas prices, environmental concerns, the climate crisis is all happening. It's essential that we eat local.
It supports the local economy. It cuts down, obviously, on transportation.
Over the last 5 to 10 years, the consumers are very interested about supporting local growers and BC growers.
I use as much fresh local product as I possibly can. Some of it comes from the Sandwich Peninsula, some of it comes from Souk, some of it comes from East Souk, some of it comes from Machosen. Some of it comes from Salt Spring Island too. Like my lamb comes from Salt Spring Island.
The local food movement is a very exclusive movement because it is successful only within the context of those who can afford the time and the money to make it work for themselves, but it does not include a broader demographic.
Think of it in this way, more as relationship rather than a distance. For the food that I eat fresh, my greens, my vegetables, my fruits, I want to be able to know the farmer that grew them. I want to be able to have a conversation with them, see them at the market on the weekend. For other things, my staples, my cereals, my grains, my potatoes, those type of things, I feel like those relationships could be longer distance. I might go and get Pemberton potatoes on a weekend, but I wouldn't drive up to Pemberton to get a bag of greens. That's how I determine what is local.
Local to me means that I can hop in the car and drive just a couple of miles down the road to the asparagus farm and get something that was picked that morning. It means I can then go from there down to my local bakery and have a beautifully baked baguette for lunch and head into the farmer's market where I meet lots of people that I know, I've been to their farms, I can chat with them about how the season's going and what it is that they're doing, and I just get a really good feeling out of coming home for the day and being able to put food on the table that I can kind of trace the history of each piece, each ingredient that I've used. Vancouver Island isn't just a great place to grow food, it's a great place to make food. That's where artisans and chefs come in. We have high-quality cheesemakers who have won national awards. They can barely keep up with the demand for their fresh and aged products. We appreciate the skill that goes into creating a fine loaf of bread. The artisan bakers help us forget the Wonder Bread years. Farmers markets are a very important part of our food culture. It's a place to go to meet the people who grow your food. It's a place where food becomes accessible. It means that you can find local food without having to drive all over the place. You can find it in one spot.
There's a chef-farmer meeting once a year, and the chefs and the farmers meet in a social atmosphere and talk about, you know, what we want this year and what we want coming up perhaps next year and the year after that.
Food trends often start with chefs. In Victoria, a group of chefs have gathered to help area farmers in a downtown market.
We started this market 2 years ago, so this is our second season out here. We run it on Thursdays and Fridays, 10 o'clock in the morning, and everything that we sell comes from local farms. We buy from over 50 different farms each day, bring it down here and put it out so local people can do their grocery shopping. Of course, every day after the market we have some leftovers, so we needed to find a way to use that up, and we went back to the old school way of canning and preserving and putting things down. We do a whole range of pickles and jams, jellies, chutneys, relishes, over 85 different products by the end of the season. It's just grown exponentially. We start off with 2 little tables with a few vegetables on it, and every day, you know, each week we'd add a few more tables, and you know, now we're up to this, which is a full-on supermarket. We have everything: cheese, bread, you know, whatever you would need to make a full dinner, you could buy right here, and it's all local.
If you try to eat locally from the island, the first thing you will find is that grains are missing. Although we once grew it successfully, very little is grown today. Still, it can be done, and a few farmers and bakers have renewed local grains.
It has good qualities and it has a good story, you know, and people that buy are going to lay out more money for food. They want a good story with it, and understandably too. And that's what you don't get in Safeway. Hey, there's no story behind that loaf of Wonder Bread. What's the story?
We named it 30 Mile Bread because that's how far it is from Tom's Field to True Grain Bread in Cowichan Bay. So we only had enough to bake once a week, and we would bake 20 or 30 loaves, and became very popular. So towards the early summer, we were selling out very early of that bread.
Grain loves to grow here. It's, you know, the climate here in South Island is like parts of Spain and Portugal and Italy and Greece, of all of which grow grain to beat the band, right? And good quality grain.
Vancouver Island farmers aren't content to provide basic commodities that can be easily grown elsewhere. Tom Henry has decided to specialize in raising Berkshire pigs, a heritage breed prized for its tasty fat content.
And to me, what's really striking is not so much what we do, but what it says about industrial agriculture. Because we're just farming like any sensible person would. And I think people that really know pork, some of our customers, and they say, you know, that it doesn't have the smell of the factory farm about it, that it doesn't have a tooth embedded in it like a lot of pork does that's been shipped a long ways under industrial conditions.
We can't show you every aspect of our local food system in a short documentary, but one of our most important foodways lies in our coastal waters. Professor John Volpe teaches and studies fisheries at the University of Victoria.
Fisheries don't exist without fishermen, and the fishing community is probably the most strident and vocal conservation group among the
the various sectors that seek conservation in the marine realm. But it's a very different scenario if we have an industrialized fleet where the fishermen are simply deckhands versus owner-operators who have literally a vested interest in the sustainability and long-term viability of those stocks. And so if we're going to see long-term sustainability in our fisheries, in our fish stocks on the coast, then we also need to have fishermen that are out there not only harvesting the food so it's available for us, but actually have the political backing so that sustainability is an issue and that we don't adopt the same economies of scale trying to find that myth of cheap food that has ruined so many agricultural communities.
When it comes to our salmon resource, everybody thinks it's disappearing. Well, part of it comes down to the fishing methods that we use. I want you to meet a fisherman named Fred Hawkshaw. He and his wife Linda use a specialized fishing method that preserves fish and makes it a much more sustainable fishery.
The government has a mandate first for conservation above all else. There is no way they cannot abide by that mandate. They have to ensure that the sustainability of the species. If the fishermen could accept that and disregard the fact that we're saving fish now for another stakeholder group, steelhead, coho, whatever, the other user group, and just accept the fact that if they do the right things, the responsible things, and release those fish unharmed as much as possible to keep the mortality down, the more access we're going to get to our target species. This is the perfect catch. That's as good as it gets. That doesn't harm the fish at all. I could throw him back in a heartbeat, he'd be gone. Just like that.
The fish are kept alive on board until just before they're shipped to the restaurant. The bycatch of protected species is released unharmed.
The quality of this road is just beyond belief from an industrial term.
There's not only fish in the ocean, there are also vegetables. I traveled with a Dutch journalist to visit Diane Bernard, the seaweed lady.
I am a commercially licensed seaweed harvester, and I use this area as a classroom. People look at this stuff here and they go, "Oh, you do seaweed." And I go, "No, this is not seaweed in its prime form. This is seaweed at the end of the cycle."
Seaweed is delicious, nutritious, and a highly underutilized food source on Vancouver Island.
This speaks really truly of the Pacific Northwest. This is Nereocystis, and it's called the big bullwhip kelp. And now I start to show why it's not like a land garden. And it's fundamentally very, very different from that grow on shore. Seaweeds don't have a root system. Color, the shine, the texture of it, and again, you know, there's nothing in here it's wet, but it's not slimy or thick or gelatinous. It's just wonderfully fresh.
Chefs like Edward Tucson of Sook Harbor House use seaweed almost every day in his kitchen.
There has to be options. You still can't grow pineapple on the island. We can't always grow some mangoes on the island. We can't grow some of the produce that we do like and we enjoy in the summer months.
True, we can't grow certain things here, but would you believe oranges, lemons, and limes?
What we have here is a citrus house, or if you want to use ancient terminology, an orangery. So there's citrus of various sorts, and the one that you're looking at right in the front here is a navel orange. And navel oranges are probably one of the more useful oranges because it's a superb orange to eat fresh on a hand.
It is so sweet.
Basically, the way it works with citrus is if it's a sweet citrus, it requires extremely high heat to sweeten the fruit. Acid citrus like lemons and limes, you can actually grow outside. But the key thing is this greenhouse is not heated. Okay. Now, there might be the very odd night in the winter if the temperature outside drops to, say, -5 or -6. Then I'll turn on a few Christmas lights in here, and that's adequate to prevent the citrus from freezing. Cherries in this plantation, the earliest varieties, early burlat, ripen as early as late May, but more typically start ripening about the 10th of June. Let's go down and have a look at some of these pie cherries over here, Dawn.
We can grow citrus fruit and all kinds of other fruit year-round on Vancouver Island. Even a harsher winter climate would still allow us to grow our own food.
In season, which is about from May to October, it's very easy. Right now, in the middle of winter, we'd be lucky to have 5 to 10% of the produce that we consume on Vancouver Island grown in Vancouver, and it's really basic things like potatoes and onions and cabbages and carrots.
I traveled for a job to Maine, and Jason told me to visit Elliot Coleman for this documentary. Elliot Coleman has written books on 4 seasons farming. It was February, and the snow was piled up very high. And here is Elliot Coleman growing vegetables.
In this greenhouse, the roof of the greenhouse is one layer protecting the area in here from the outside weather in Maine. Our second layer is this spun-bonded fabric, and this makes the additional difference of being able to now have Maine outside, something like the climate of New Jersey inside, and something like the climate of Georgia under here. This is a very nutritious green. I mean, you look at something like that green leaf and you realize this is about as delicious as it gets. This is another very hardy winter crop known as Claytonia or miner's lettuce. Every time we cut it, it comes up with more new green leaves. It comes up with flowers, which are actually also edible. If there is one poster child for the winter garden, it would be spinach, and the second one would be leeks. We don't have any leeks in here. We have them in the commercial operation over at the farm. But again, you give this much protection to leeks, and even in our very cold climate, they're going to make it through the winter. One of the keys to harvesting year-round is that you have to be planting year-round. There are always new young crops coming along. So this is new young spinach coming that will replace the older spinach that we've been harvesting. This is new beds of arugula. There are new beds of turnips and other crops down there. The whole gamut of them. But every time we finish a harvest and clear a bed, we clean it up, recompost it, and plant it to the next crop in succession. And this way, the harvest is just this wonderful dance with a new step every time you go, and the music is continuous right through the year.
Now here on Vancouver Island, we have our own hothouse industry now. So people are growing more hothouse tomatoes, peppers, Longinish cucumbers. There's organic growers that want to do more business, but our problem, of course, on Vancouver Island, we don't have a great storage capacity. We can't really keep things more than a month or 2 after we harvest. And particularly perishable items, you can't keep them for more than a week. You've got to sell them through the system.
It's surprising for a lot of people to come into a greenhouse and see plants growing actually in the soil, because so much of greenhouse growing today is hydroponic, where the plants are growing in some sort of artificial medium and being fed artificially. But we find that if you take good care of the soil and use plenty of compost, there's no need to go to an artificial medium. And the energy involved in using that, compared to the simple task of just spreading compost on the soil and mixing it in, if we can do it this way and we can get this beautiful color and quality of crops, then there's absolutely no reason to do it any other way.
There are so many things we can do on the island that we learned through doing this documentary. Part of John and Katie Ehrlich's business is running a box program called Community Supported Agriculture.
CSA is Community Supported Agriculture. So as the farmer, I grow for up to about 100 households. I started off fairly small the first couple of years with 20, 30 households, and then we gradually build up. These families pay up front before the season begins, about $400 on average. And they get vegetables, the harvest from May through November. Every week we distribute the vegetables to them.
We come and we pick up fresh vegetables on a box a week plan, and she always has a newsletter and some recipes inside. For instance, we have garlic scapes this week, I believe. And there's delicious vegetables inside that are fresh right off the farm right here. Their customers are directly in the community, and we really like having very local farming that's good for the earth and everybody.
In my opinion, it's one of the best things you can find in the area. And that's why I pick it up. I live too far away to have it delivered, so I need to pick it up. And I mean, it's great produce, and it's great crops and very good quality. And I'm also very interested in the way that they produce it.
I love that it's always freshly picked, so you don't get lettuce that's mush like 3 days after you buy it.
We get a small package because we are also trying to grow our own food. And so I get lots of greens, lots of fruit when it's ready, and just a big variety.
But it's also having the opportunity to make the connection with the people and to see how good vegetables really make a difference to people.
Meanwhile, our youngest farmer is still optimistic about her first season. How's it going?
It's going well. We have our new, I call it the mobile egger. It's our new layer hen coop. We built it on an old camper trailer, so the whole unit can actually be moved. Hey. I think last time you were here, we were talking about the mink that got into them. So I've been able to get about, I think I have about 80 layers now. I get about 28 dozen eggs a week. And things didn't work out with Spud, and they didn't need my eggs anymore. So now I sell to the community farm store in Duncan, and they've been terrific. And I sell them 20 dozen a week, and that's about my only income right now.
She's also been busy building a new greenhouse.
I'm hoping to have it covered this year. I've got my tomatoes in here, I have some really sad peppers and some cucumbers. It's all PVC and any kind of free wood we could find, basically. And I'm also hoping over the winter that I'm going to be able to put in some salad greens and some braising greens. I was hoping this year to be able to go to the market. I was really optimistic, a little naive, I think, about how much I was going to be able to grow. This year so far I've been able to sell eggs and some chicken and some peas and radishes, but that's about it, and mostly just to my friends that are helping me get started. I think mostly what I've got left will be for myself over the winter, and next year I'm really optimistic about next year.
Something happens. You're out there and you've been frustrated as hell, or things are not going well, and it's a beautiful day and the wind is blowing and you feel alive and you go, aha, so this is why I'm doing this. Simple things, little things.
We created this documentary without funding and without sponsors. Don Genova, Jason Fount, and myself put our thoughts together to show what is happening on our island. I always say that 10% of the people care about the issues and are making changes. I think this number is growing. I get excited when I see lineups for good bread at the Moss Market, or a lineup to get into Seedy Saturday, where people exchange seeds and try to protect their seeds. But that's a whole other topic. There are so many topics that we haven't even mentioned, but let us start with something fundamental, our daily food and the people who create it for us. It is nothing new. It has been here for thousands of years, but somehow we have lost our connection with it. That's why we made this documentary. and hopefully reach part of the 90%.
I say to that 90%, I say, you've got to be participating in this process more than just giving me your money.
I think we need to reach people and help them understand that food is not a commodity, just as water is not a commodity. It can't be traded like cars, it can't be traded like bricks. It's something very different. We need food to live, we need water to live. It's our culture, it's our sustenance. It has to be more than just a commodity. Hopefully films like this will convince more people of that.
I find that policymakers need to see, just like the rest of us need to see. They need to be able to come here and go, oh, I mean, you can generate that much income off of this, and you can do it this way, and I thought this wasn't possible in this climate, and and this is actually a viable livelihood.
I think most people are addicted, and industry has certainly tried to addict them. I think most people are addicted to sugary things. So it's hard to get them excited about the delicate flavor of some new broccoli variety because it isn't as sugary as they think it should be.
As in my own case, when I was diagnosed with cancer 4 years ago, I now pay much more attention to what I'm eating, but also where it comes from, how it was grown. And I think a lot of people are in the same position that I'm in, that they're paying more attention to that.
You have to take your food back into your own hands. You need to know where it comes from. You need to know what's in it. You need to take more joy in the preparation of it. You need to re-establish those family traditions. Take your kids to the farmer's market. Take your kids to the you pick blueberry or strawberry stands. Do some preserving. These are all things that my mother did and that I've started to pick up over the years. And it just makes a lot more sense.
And I really believe that that's once again close to being doable because people like yourself and others who support local food are recognizing that it has more value.
You can get to any topic through food. You can talk about climate change, you can talk about labor laws, you can talk about healthy eating, you can talk about community, family, you can talk about livelihoods, all through food. And I think food is really powerful in that way, when you can sit down at a table with people and talk about these really important topics.
My daughter and I worked at Foxglove Farm this week. My daughter's 12 and wanted to start getting her some work experience, and really got to understand how organic farming takes place and also where food comes from. So it's very important to also educate our children about these matters.
Kids don't have too many fingerprints on their brain. You know, they're easily influenced. So if you influence them with something positive, it's going to stick. Hey, mommy, how come we're having canned soup tonight? That's the questions that I want their kids to ask the parents.
Look at the difference between the mid-70s and now. Wow, the angle's entirely on the upslope, and I still see that we have a lot more to go. More people are interested in buying local food and paying more for it, recognizing that. And if we continue on this trajectory, we will have small farmers on the lower end of the middle class.
More and more people are going to be demanding food that's grown right, and the agricultural world is going to have to respond. Businesses respond when there's demand, and you will see more and more farmers converting their farms to an organic farm.
Being a farmer is really a privilege, and it's just a joy for me to be able to have the opportunity to work in the garden with the soil and see the vegetables grow.